Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's Explore Classroom event. My name is Joe Grabowski from National Geographic, and I will be your host for today. Really excited for today's event because we're taking a little virtual field trip to catch up with Paul Salopek on his Out of Eden journey around the world. So we're joined today by Paul and his walking companion, Jay. He's been walking with Paul for the last 40 days. So for those who are just tuning in live on YouTube, don't forget you can get in on the action with us today. You can join in with the chat sidebar on the right. Let us know where you're watching from and send us in some questions and we'll work some of those in. And then for anybody who's tuning in, whether you're on camera with us today or joining on YouTube, take some pictures, post them to Twitter with the hashtag Explore Classroom, tag at Nat Geo Education. And we'd love to see pictures of classrooms in action. All right, so as mentioned, we're connecting with Paul today and his walking partner, Jay. So Paul's Out of Eden walk is a 21,000-mile journey tracing the pathways of the first humans who migrated out of Africa. His journey will take him from the southernmost tip, or take him all the way to the southernmost tip of South America in Tierra del Fuego. So along the way, he's practicing slow journalism, meeting people and recording their stories while covering the major stories of our time, from climate change to technological innovation, from mass migration to cultural survival. His words, as well as his photographs, videos, audio, create a global record of human life as we start a new millennium, as told by villagers, nomads, traders, farmers, soldiers, and artists. So the people who rarely make the news. So Paul and Jay, it is so great to have you joining us live from Myanmar tonight. We're excited to catch up on your last leg. And then we've got a ton of classrooms joining us today who are excited with some questions.
That's great. Should we wait that 10 seconds, Joe, or are we ready to go?
We are good, Paul. We are live.
Okay, great. Well, it's great to be back and eager to talk and get questions from all of you guys. I'm often asked, if I walk alone on my project across the world, and the answer is no. I'm very rarely alone. I'm always with somebody who's leading me through a landscape and interpreting it for me. And by great good luck, I have one of these walking partners with me tonight. That's Jaffa Say, also he calls himself Jay, and he's here to take questions too. If you might have questions about this country that we just crossed over into Myanmar. I'll talk a little bit about India tonight, and then Jay can probably answer any questions our students might have about Myanmar. But in a nutshell, since I last spoke to you, Joe, in northern India, I've walked about another 1,000 kilometers or so through India, through the Northeast. And I think the last time I was with another walking partner, Bianca. And since then, we've covered jungled hills, big river valleys along the Brahmaputra River. And for students who might be studying geography, you might recognize that name. It's a famous river in South Asia, the Brahmaputra. It's one of the three massive rivers in the Indian subcontinent. There's the Indus, there's the Ganges, and then the Brahmaputra. And so I've had the great privilege of walking through all three of those watersheds. And it is a mighty river, and we have some photos. So maybe we should go to the photos now so we can zip through those, Joe, and then we can get to the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to do, boys and girls, is I'm going to pin the video to my screen. So that's going to show my screen, and then I'm going to share it, and you'll be able to see Paul's images while he talks about them. So let's get that loaded up, and we will start with the images. So Paul, you should be able to see my screen now, and the images, I'm just going to bring them to full screen.
Great. I sure do.
All right. Awesome.
So yeah, so basically I'm going to show you some pretty pictures to give you an idea of what the landscape has been like in the last, pretty much since about April, actually, maybe even a little bit before, since the spring. And the northeastern part of India, which is part of West Bengal, Assam, and 7 other states, is very beautiful. It's renowned for its beauty. It has beautiful national parks. In the background there, this is walking with Siddharth Agrawal in the middle and 2 local chaps who joined us for a few kilometers. That often happens. And for students who might be new to the project, let me just step back one moment to say this is a storytelling project. I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, And the idea is to retrace the pathways of humankind across the world back in the Stone Age, do it in the old Stone Age fashion, which is on foot, and record my encounters with the people that I meet along the way and the issues that are occupying their minds and hearts. And I always, as I mentioned, walk with local folks who act as kind of my windows onto the human landscape around me. So here is Siddharth in the middle, walking with two local guys. They happen to be teachers, both of them. And you see a line of trees in the background. That's a big national park just over the horizon called Buxar Tiger Preserve, and there are still some tigers there. But I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of what a typical day might look like. This was a nice day. We were on a back road, quiet farm road. Next image. And here we go with a picture of that famous river, the Brahmaputra. Now, what I like about this picture, besides that there's a nice reflection of the sun, this was sunset. And Jay, you've been to India, you've probably seen the Brahmaputra.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Is how massive this river is. This is a big river. And so you can't really tell how big it is. This could be like a puddle that you could almost step across. But students, that, where the sun is reflecting in that little kind of inlet, that's big enough for like a major cargo ship to sail into. So this kind of sandbar that you see sticking out into the current, that's probably like a mile long. That's how big this river is. That is a huge piece of landscape we're looking at. And I shot that from a very massive bridge that crosses the Brahmaputra. Next image. Now, for a couple years in the past, in like 2016 through 2018, I was walking through Central Asia along the old Silk Roads. And I suddenly stumbled across silk markets in northeastern India that began to remind me of the Silk Roads that I used to walk on years before, because they had beautiful hand-woven silks for sale. And this is just one example. Some of you might notice the provocative, what to us is the provocative pattern on the orange fabric. That's a swastika indeed, but it's the original swastika from ancient Indian cultures going way back to the Bronze Age. And it's actually a motif, a symbol of good luck and peace in its original conception before it was warped by the Nazis in World War II. Next image. This is just a picture of how diverse this part of India is. This kind of, it's actually like it's called a panhandle. It's like an appendage that sticks out of the main body of the country of India and juts up between the countries of Bhutan and China and Myanmar and Bangladesh. This area is incredibly diverse in terms of its human landscape. It has more than 200 different ethnic groups, and it has scores of different languages. And I just like this picture because these women are traditional Assamese dancers, and they've come to perform their ethnic group's traditional dance. And during that day, I saw many different dances from many different ethnic groups. Next image. And just another overview shot of kind of what the landscape looked like. And these, if you can imagine, if you guys were walking along with me, you'd be seeing landscapes like this day after day, week after week. Can anybody guess what's being grown there? What's it look like? Any ideas? I don't know if the audio is on I can't hear, so I'll just say it's paddy. Rice. Rice. You guys are right. These are rice paddies. And there were miles and miles and days of rice paddies. So even the cuisine, the menu started to shift in this part of India. It became more kind of Southeast Asian, if you will. There was now kind of noodles starting to appear on plates, and they were in the bowls, and less dal. And as those of you who know about Indian food, dal is kind of the classic, staple of India. So again, this part of the journey has been really fascinating for me because I'm walking slowly from a South Asian context, very Indian. And India itself is very diverse, of course, but into now a slow gradation into Southeast and Far East Asia. There's kind of a change in landscape, a change in human culture. Next image.
Sorry, Paul, it's just jammed up here. Let's see. There we go.
Okay. And just as an example, I like this picture because it's an example of how culturally and kind of even spiritually diverse India is. And this is a case here along the road where you have a picture, or this was a sculpture garden. There's an artisan making sculptures, one of Jesus for Christianity, and then sitting right next to him is Ganesh, right? The Hindu god of good fortune, right, of prosperity. Next image. I get asked a lot, Jay, you'll probably get asked this too, about what do we eat when we're walking along, and we eat whatever's available, right? And this is one example of what a lunch in Assam consisted of one day. This is my walking partner, Priyanka, and we managed to find a boiled egg. And what was kind of interesting is that the salesman, let this motorcycle pass, the salesman who was selling these boiled eggs was using old student test papers that he'd probably salvaged from a dumpster somewhere to wrap the eggs in. So this one actually has like somebody's chemistry test. Next image.
All right, so Paul, this is where we jump to one of the videos. So I'm just gonna shrink down the screen. And
I'm gonna set up this video real quick, Joe, where you're doing it.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to tell you is that on this part of the walk, I began to do a lot of coverage of sort of labor issues, of how people work, and in particular, how women contribute to the economy of India. And I'll leave it at that. This is a brick making kiln in Assam. Let's take a look. It's about 2 minutes long.
All right.
सुनो सुनो आप क्रंच में आया आप ठीक आया ডাবলেবে সকালে লেটে হয় এই প্লেট দিতে হবে সকালে লেটে এক ভারতে কুতি দৌড়েছে এ নাইতে 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 ঠিক আছে ফটো দে ফটো Oh, she wants to dance.
All right. I'll just make a comment on that video that we can talk about if anybody's interested in the Q&A. But women contribute an enormous amount to the economy of India, as they do to most countries. But they often end up working in the hardest jobs. You know, they do a lot of the really hard physical labor. And these ladies, these women, were working up to 12 hours a day, earning less than $2 a day. And those cargoes of bricks that they're carrying on their heads weigh 90 to 100 pounds, about 40 kilos. Studies have been done on their medical conditions. More than half are anemic. They have underweight body mass. They work that was an incredibly hot, dusty day. And this is one of the examples of the great privilege that I have. I'm a privileged walker. I mean, I have National Geographic supporting me. I've got great friends like Jay who help me to see lives that are radically different than our own, that are really tough. And it's very common around the world. I think I've said before that one of the greatest social injustices that I've seen over and over again in this long foot journey across the planet is the treatment of women. It's very unequal in almost every single society that I've walked through. They generally get paid less, they work harder, they get up first on farms, they're the last to go to bed, and yet in some places they can't even own land. So that's just something to think about our privileged condition. And I'll just close that comment on that video. The thing that, I don't know if you could hear it because it was a little bit choppy on my end, but even in such harsh circumstances, what are they doing? These women are singing. That, to me, was an example of kind of this indomitable human spirit, that even under the worst conditions, people keep each other's spirits up by singing. All right, Joe, I think there's just two images left, maybe. I just wanted to close it out on some of the extraordinarily beautiful landscapes that I've been so lucky to walk through these last months. This is the GD River, which is a very wild river, undeveloped river in Manipur. It's the border of Assam and Manipur, just before coming close to cross over here to Myanmar. So this is kind of a landscape that even Jay would recognize because, you know, your home country north of here probably looks a bit like this.
Yes, something like that. Yeah.
So kind of forested, you know, pretty wet and misty, a little chilly, it's high.
Yeah.
And kind of a wild river running down. I think there's one last image, maybe. And that's just a picture of what a trail looks like, right? Going down the same river. That's a typical day walking through the northeast towards Myanmar. And that's it. I think I'll just leave it there, given the time, and take questions.
All right, perfect. Well, Paul, thanks so much for sharing. You know, that video was a really vivid video. I loved it. Thanks so much for sharing that video. And the images of the landscapes are always incredible. You know, you really get to immerse yourself in some pretty incredible landscapes. So thanks so much for sharing that with us today. And Jay, we're excited to have you joining in. We're going to start meeting some of our live classrooms. We'll introduce them, give them a chance to ask questions. So let's get that started. So our first group, oops, there we go. Joining us live today. Let's start off with Mr. Richard's group. So they're joining us in Amherst View. So they're in Canada. They're a grade 6-7 class. Let me get their microphone turned on. There it is. How are we doing, 6-7s?
Good. Hi.
How do you get over these language gaps? Do you get help from the locals?
A good question, yeah. The man to answer it sitting right next to me. I rely on people like Jay to help translate because, for example, like in the northeast of India, where there are dozens of languages, scores of languages, there's no hope that even walking slowly that I can have enough time to learn them well. And here, I probably will have time to pick up a little more because I'll be walking months in this country. So it depends on how long I'm walking through a language. For example, in Central Asia, when I was walking through places like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, I was there for 2 years. I was able to pick up enough Russian to get by because Russian is kind of the common language. Here, I probably won't get nearly that adept. Jay, how many languages do you speak?
4 languages.
So this is very common. North Americans in particular, generally don't speak too many languages. And Jay is typical of the rest of the world. Most people outside of the US, outside of North America, carry a few extra languages around with them. Unfortunately, the ones that I'm carrying aren't much use to me. Good question.
All right, awesome question to start us off. Let's head to the US now. Let's go to Virginia Beach. We've got some boys and girls hanging out with Mrs. Schnexer. Let me get her microphone turned on. There we go. How we doing, boys and girls?
How far has he walked? How many miles? Hey there.
How many miles has he walked?
You have to talk
How
more.
many?
How many miles has he walked?
Okay. we're going to give you two answers. I'll let Jay answer how much you've walked.
Yeah.
For how much have you walked since we started walking together?
Just about more than 400 kilometers.
Yeah. 400 kilometers. That's how many miles? It's like about 250 maybe?
Yeah, 250. Yeah.
About 250. So Jay's walked about 250 with me, and I have walked since I started in 2013 out of Ethiopia in Africa. I've walked, I think about 10,000 miles maybe. I'm not even sure, 11,000 maybe. It's hard to keep track. So a friend of mine at the university in Harvard keeps track for me, but I don't really know. But you know, the funny thing, it's a good question, but the funny thing is if you spend your life walking, you sort of stop counting, right? I mean, we are counting, but I'm not like adding it up every day. Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. All right, let's go now. Yeah, let's go. We've got with Miss Leach at the Loka Center for Education, Culture, and Organic Farming in India. We have a group hanging out with us. Let me get their microphone turned on. There they are. How are we doing, boys and girls?
We're fine. Thank you. Good
evening. Welcome. Good to see you all again. I recognize some faces.
Good. So Dinesh, you had a question.
Sir, you are doing good for the people, for the all peoples, but peoples are doing just they are polluting and just they are doing opposite. So you are not that time you are discouraged.
What Dinesh is trying to ask is that you have like this huge and noble endeavor, and in the meanwhile we see that so much pollution is going on in the world. Do you never get discouraged?
Oh yeah, it's a good question. I'm gonna have both. We should both have our own take on that because Jay's a really long distance walker. He spends a lot of time outdoors. He's an outdoor guide. But for me, yes. One of the things that has struck me about this walk across the world is that it's across some very empty deserts and some very empty mountains and some pretty wild landscapes. And yet even there, our thumbprint, the human thumbprint has made its mark in terms of like trash, in terms of plastics that have blown in on the wind, in terms of water quality, in terms of the volume of the water, right? We use so much, we dam rivers. So I am sometimes discouraged by how much we have altered the surface of the earth, even in the most, what should be the most pristine areas. I sense something, and I sensed it even among you when I came and visited your classroom, that there's a changing awareness, and you are going to help us make this better. Your generation, all of you on this interaction. I'm not putting it on you. I have to do my work too. So does Jay. But if you turn that question around and say, do I have hope? The answer is yes, too. Because you guys are the first generation that's really seized on this and are demanding change. You're not just asking it, you're demanding it. And I support you completely in that. Jay, do you have any comments about how much your landscape has changed?
Yeah, even in our country, like since 2-3 decades, as the weather is just dramatically changing. So, like we can notice, like in the very remote part, northern part of Myanmar, especially in my place, we can notice significantly. But like in down part of Myanmar, like the weather is just dramatically changing. So it's becoming very hot and it's distressing.
Very fast changes in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Great question. So great to see you all again. I miss you.
All right, awesome. I think that's a really good point, Paul, is things do feel like they're getting a little bit different. The younger generation is switched on, they're paying attention, and they're not letting their voices be silenced. They're loud and they're making their message heard. So I'm excited, I'm optimistic too.
Absolutely.
All right, let us take a little trip now. We're gonna go back to Canada. Mr. Plutt has some students hanging out with him. Let's get their microphone turned on. How we doing, boys and girls? Oops, let's try that again. There we go.
How do you know where to go?
That's a great question. That is a really good question. It seems so simple. You know, how do you know where to go? You know, you wake up in the morning, you know, we pull on our boots, and the honest answer is we sort of don't really know where we're going. We get lost an awful lot, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, we have a general direction. We're kind of headed, you know, east and a bit south. But, you know, what walking has taught me is that don't get nervous. If you don't know exactly where you're going, if you just walk long enough, you'll eventually find someplace that you want to be, right? Now, I'm an extreme case because I've walked so many miles. I'm going to, you know, I go walk across the horizon. But even in your case, it's a nice, I love your question. It's really great because it's for, even if you're not walking in the morning, and I encourage all of you to do a little walk every day, right? Just around your neighborhood. But don't worry too much about getting lost, okay? Because you're in this larger family of humanity, and generally people are good. And if you walk to goodness, you will find goodness. And being a little lost is not such a bad thing because it keeps you alert, keeps you awake, right? Kind of looking around the land a little bit more. You're looking for landmarks. Yeah. You're talking to people to try to find your way. It makes you a little bit more alive. I think there's an opposite problem, and it comes especially with these devices, right? That do all the navigation for us these days. That you think you're always found. Well, actually, this puts you to sleep. You know, if you're staring into this too much, you're not looking around. And I'm talking about Google Maps and navigational tools like that. Good question. Thank you.
All right, awesome question. So we're going to take a trip now to some third graders who are joining us in Illinois, and they're with Miss Knight and Miss Piera right now. So let's get their microphone turned on and see how they're doing. How we doing, third graders?
Hello. Yeah.
All right, lots of third graders.
Okay. What happens if you like go like to a lake, and how are you supposed to get like through it past the water and stuff?
That's a good question too. You know, how do you? It was a little bit low, so I'm just repeat it to make sure I heard it. It's how do like if I come to a body of water, like a lake, how do I get past it? Jay, maybe you could talk about rivers too, because that's your main water barrier, right? Yeah. How do you cross rivers? If you come across a big river on foot, what do you do?
Usually, like taking boat, we had to take boat, motorboat, or canoe, ferry boat.
Yeah, so you float across it, right, or raft across it.
Yeah.
You know, for big rivers where you don't have a raft, it's sometimes dangerous, but you can try with a pole, right? You know, like a bamboo pole to kind of carefully go across, but you got to be careful. When it comes to bigger bodies of water like lakes or even oceans, I've had to do what Jay says, which is I've had to find a boat. So I crossed the Red Sea in a boat that was carrying hundreds of camels and sheep to Saudi Arabia. And I crossed the Caspian Sea in a big cargo ship that was carrying big trucks that were driven by Turkish truck drivers. So, you know, our ancestors, I'm following the ancient ancestors from the Stone Age who had the same problem. And when they got to a beach with an ocean, they had two options. You know, they didn't have big boats. They didn't have motorboats. They had to either turn left or right and just walk along the edge of a continent, right? Until some very brave souls would push, you know, a log into the surf and use that to maybe go out into the sea. And I remember reading something about the ancient, you know, early Homo sapiens, early humans, or early Neanderthal people. You guys have heard of the Neanderthals, our ancient cousins, right? That how many times must they have pushed logs out to sea and just never disappeared for generations, maybe for hundreds of years, until one day one person actually came back and said, hey, there's another shoreline on the other side. That's called exploration.
All right, awesome. We're going to head to another class now. They're joining us in Florida with Mr. LeVogue. Let's get their microphone turned on. There it is. How we doing, boys and girls?
Good.
Go ahead, Yaniv, ask your question.
My question is, what was the favorite part of your journey? Ooh.
Did you hear, Paul?
Mobile one. Yeah, what was the favorite part of my journey?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, great, good question again. You guys are like being young newspaper reporters. You're asking great questions today. I'm going to answer about the world, the walk that I've taken so far. I'm going to ask Jay to think about what you've seen in the last 40 days that was your favorite, maybe day, or your favorite experience. Gosh, for me, there were so many, but they're often, they're not, you'd think it would be like a mountaintop or a beautiful view, like the pictures that I just showed you, and that is exciting. But for me, what rings my bell are people. It's certain encounters with people that somehow transform my day, that somehow on occasion, I don't know if this happens to you, but you meet somebody who makes you a better person if you're lucky. And I've met so many people who I think I've learned from on this trip. My trip is like a gigantic classroom, right? That goes from horizon to horizon. I meet farmers, I meet people like Jay who teach me things. And I think those have been the highlights. The people I walk with, in Saudi Arabia, walking with a man named Mohammed bin Unam, who taught me about the desert, how to navigate across the desert. Walking in Turkey with a photographer named Murat Yazad, right? Who was this soulful character who had poetry in his heart and was very deeply attached to his homeland. Walking through India with amazing partners like Arti Kumar Rao, another nature photographer who was very switched on, very alive to the natural landscape. Bianca Pujari, who's one of the best journalists I've met, just a curious person to the bone. Siddharth Agarwal, a man who's passionate about rivers, who's walked out hundreds and hundreds of kilometers and miles along rivers. So that's been those have been the best days when I find somebody like that, who pulls me out of like a tired day when I might be sweating and my shoulders might be sore because my backpack straps are cutting into me, and kind of takes me out of myself and makes me bigger for a few minutes. Jay, what do you, on these last 40 days walking through this landscape, what struck you?
Yeah, the favorite part of our walking day is like passing through the national park, like a big forest, like less traffic, and we just hear like beautiful, like a nature sound, and just walking through the forest, and so the air is fresh, so and less traffic noise, and we just hear the nature sound in the morning or in the afternoon. So this is the best part of our walking journey.
It makes walking a pleasure.
Yeah.
Good question again.
All right, that's awesome. And I think I love the stories that you're telling and sharing people's stories, because, so often the news likes to sensationalize things, and you see views of countries that are, through the media, and you're showing real stories and what these countries are actually like. And I think that's a pretty awesome task that you've undertook. It's pretty cool. Let's see, Mr. McFarland. They are in Chicago. Let's get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, Chicago?
Hello. Sit right there. I got to see your camera.
Have you faced any challenges during your walk that are caused by climate change? And then, have you faced any positive changes from climate change?
That's an interesting question. Jay, let's, if we have the time, Joe, I'd like both of us to answer that, because Jay's talked about climate change in the kind of local context. Globally, yes, I've seen climate change from the very first days that I set out walking. in Ethiopia, where I was walking through a desert that was getting even drier. The rain was getting more unpredictable, and so the local communities that depended on grass and water, who had always been kind of fighting each other for control of water holes, for control of grazing lands for their camels, were fighting each other even more intensively. So there's a case where climate change was causing human violence. And I just want to tell you an anecdote. I just contacted a scientist that I knew there 6 years ago, just 2 days ago, and I said, what's the situation like there now? And he said, Paul, it's even worse. He's had to leave his study area. He's an anthropologist who is looking for ancient human bones, Dr. Tim White in Berkeley. He said, I've had to kind of leave my study area because it's gotten so violent that it's not safe to work there anymore. So that's one example of how climate change has been very negative. On the positive side, I walked through Afghanistan, a mountainous part of Afghanistan, where the melting of the glaciers was temporarily causing a water bonanza for these farmers living in the canyons, and they were like in heaven, because they suddenly could expand their fields and grow more crops because they'd never seen so much water in their life. What they sort of intuited, they know what's going on. They know their landscape better than I or any outside, expert does. They knew it wasn't going to last. They knew that this was kind of the last gasp of their glaciers, the last gift, if you were, before things got really grim. Because once their glaciers melted down beyond a certain point, they weren't even going to get the usual smaller amount of water that came every year because the ice simply wasn't there. So this was like the last feast before a very long famine. Jay, any anecdotes about climate change up in northern Myanmar?
Yeah, like as I told you, in my place, so even actually I'm not a part of Myanmar. From another part of Myanmar. So in my place, like when I was just a boy at the time, there is a creek nearby my our village. So that the water volume used to be quite big. We can swim in like in the morning and in the evening. But now the water level is very low, too low that we can't swim now. So this kind of the global warming.
Yeah, so it's one example.
Yeah.
Just multiply that by thousands of similar anecdotes, happening all over Myanmar, all over the world.
Yeah.
It's a bit scary.
All right, great question from our group in Chicago. Thanks for bringing up the issue of climate change. Let's see, we have one more class to visit. We're going to Kingston, Ontario this time. Grade 7's hanging out with Mr. Candela. Let's get that microphone turned on. There it is. How are we doing, Kingston?
I'm Chloe. This is Avery and Miriam. And we're in grade 7. We're from Calvin Park Public School.
We're in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, and we have some questions to ask you.
Okay, guys.
You said that the people you meet along the way inspire you to keep going.
But what inspired you to start walking?
Nice. I like that. This is a sequential question. That's great. And a good observation, right? I can talk about how great it's been since I've been walking, and generally it's been one of the best things that's happened in my life. But what got me started to begin with? The honest answer is more of the same. Because I didn't start doing what I'm doing now when I began the Out of Eden Walk project. I was doing it in a less organized way for many, many years as a foreign correspondent. And so I was based in Africa for about a decade, and I was doing a lot of walking in Africa to cover many different kinds of stories in Africa. And so I've been kind of informally doing this project without even realizing it in an official way. So in a nutshell, the cleanest answer, and it's the truest, is it's because I've been shaped by my interactions with people, often people unlike me, people who don't look like me from a very early age, even before I started working as a reporter. If you want to go very far back, when I was 6 years old, my family moved from California to a small village on the central plateau of Mexico, right? And so I think maybe that's when my walk really started. Good question.
All right. Well, Paul, Jay, it's been so great to have a little bit of your time today. I mean, the last 40 days, the 400 or some kilometers you've covered, I mean, it must have been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing some of those stories and for taking us a little bit back to that last little piece of India. The video, the pictures, the landscape, it looked absolutely incredible. So thank you for taking us into your world for a little bit. So absolutely. I want to give a huge shout out to our classrooms today. They were amazing. Boys and girls, thank you for the awesome questions. For our group in India, our groups in the US, our groups in Canada, you guys are incredible. Thanks so much for those questions. And the last thing I'm going to do today, Paul, is I'm going to turn the microphones on. It's going to get a little bit loud, a big goodbye and thank you. And then we will let you guys get to your evening. So here we go. Much everybody for tuning in today. Paul, thank you so much. We're looking forward to another connection with you on the 11th at the same time, 10 a.m. Eastern. Thanks everyone for tuning into today's Explorer Classroom.